Episode 29, Heralding Joy. Joy is a difficult concept. We use it without much thought, mostly in songs and writings inherited from previous generations. We love to talk about how seasons and experiences give us joy. But what the heck is joy? Have you ever felt it? I'm not sure I have. I've had clear moments of happiness and satisfaction, fulfillment, satedness. But joy, I don't know. This line of questioning surfaced recently as I was listening to Christmas music. Of course, 'tis the season. The forever favorite Joy to the World came on, and it made me wonder, do we even know what the song is talking about? What is this joy business? So I did some digging. The song originated actually as a poem by hymnist Isaac Watts in the 1700s. An inspiration for this poem, well, it's a little murky. Some sources say it was Psalm 98. If you're familiar, that's a psalm that praises God for his marvelous deeds. Doesn't seem to quite fit. Others say it's Genesis 3, which is about the serpent in the Garden of Good and Evil, and that really doesn't seem to fit. But whatever sources claim, the lyrics of the poem and the carol that followed are pretty easy to understand. Let the whole world be joyful that the Savior, Jesus Christ, who rules with love and righteousness, is finally here. And so I guess my question at this juncture is that worthy of joy? To answer it, I think it might be helpful to revisit some of the historical context of the Levant, or present-day Near East, where Jesus was born, to understand what this joy was really all about. At the time of Jesus' birth, Bethlehem was in the kingdom of Judah. Although it wasn't really a sovereign kingdom, it was under the thumb of the Roman Empire and the Emperor Caesar Augustus. Much like all those in positions of power across the empire, taxation and poverty were heavily levied on the poor. Some estimate that the poor were taxed 50 to 60%. And all of that went into Caesar's coffers, the coffers of the Roman Empire. A 1994 article that I dug up in the LA Times did a really nice deep dive into the circumstances surrounding Jesus' birth, and they paint the scene rather vividly. They wrote this: Caesar was so tax hungry, wrote Richard Horsley, who's the author of Liberation of Christmas, said that if someone couldn't pay those taxes, the Romans would force the peasants to go back home and farm their land again, even though they left it because they couldn't make it. So there was nothing there to farm. The land was infertile. It wouldn't produce food. And he suspects that Joseph, who is cast in biblical literature as a carpenter or woodworker, was actually a downwardly mobile peasant who had lost his land, which means he was a farmer and ultimately was taxed so heftily, I should say, that his land was taken away from him. He couldn't actually deliver on the taxes that were required by the Roman Empire. So from a Roman standpoint, things were, yes, difficult at best, oppressive at worst. Then there's the semi-autonomous kingdom of Judah. That wasn't much better. Now, according to Horsley, the reigning King Herod ruled the region as a de facto police state, which is honestly worse than the Romans would have it. But because of a measure of autonomy, Herod was free to do this. Herod, in addition to all of that, much like his Roman counterparts, took what he could from the people of Judah. All right, so there was a sort of double taxation happening. And the result was that most people in the poorer classes, like Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, were living like one bag of food to like one meal at a time. Like they were in subsistence farming. They would make enough for like one bag of food, save that for themselves. The next one would go to Herod or to Caesar. So they were just living meal to meal, day to day. And, when the taxation was so bad that everything left on the farm went to Caesar or Herod, they had nothing left for themselves. That's when you go a different route, which presumably is why Joseph went the way of woodworking or carpentry. Now, to top all of this off, the Jews lived in constant tension with the Roman authority. The Romans chose, as I mentioned, to give the Jewish people a measure of autonomy to maintain peace, but they also taxed them at an exorbitant rate, and Herod did the same. But as an added strike against Herod, he was seen as an unabashed murderer and thug, beating down those who didn't follow his orders or pay up. So all this is to say, the people in Mary, Joseph, and Jesus' class were oppressed. They had no social or economic mobility. Most of them were barely surviving. And they didn't have much say in how their lives could be lived. Their entire focus was on surviving, which means every decision they made, largely, had to do with, what can I do to feed my family? What can I do to feed myself? This was the context of Galilee, of Judah, and of the Roman rule in the Levant at the time. So is it any wonder that our narratives, our songs, our poems painting the picture of Christmas Day are about joy? But picture the contrast. You got two exploitative dictators, both likely murderers and certainly oppressors, replaced by one undeniable king who rules not according to greed and power, but by love, righteousness, fairness, kindness, forgiveness. And it would be one thing if this were some pie in the sky preaching by someone on the periphery of society. No, this was real. Jesus was a flesh and blood savior who promised something real, something truly possible. That is the root of the joy. The possibility of salvation, the real possibility of salvation from oppression, to live freely and with food and the means to care for one's own family. Do we really know that kind of joy today? Now, some do, I have no doubt. But most of us, myself included, who belt out the tried and true carols, don't really know what we're singing about, do we? So then I guess my question is, how do we find joy? What does that look like in a world where we have more comforts than most people do, where we don't really want for basic necessities? Or do I have that wrong? And is it on us to create that joy for others?